This is a production of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America.
From Chicago, along the shores of Lake Michigan, this is MOSAIC, the video magazine of the ELCA.
I asked the captain, what vessel is that, Cap? He says, that's the Edmund Fitzgerald coming out of Superior.
What happens in the Great Lakes affects what happens 2,000 miles from here.
If we look back to the Bible, we were created in God's image and we were given husbandry or the dominion over all things.
Hi, I'm your host, Deborah Hermele. Thanks for watching. Our planet is covered with water, but 95% is salty. We can't drink it or use it to grow food. 20% of the water that is available can be found right here in the Great Lakes. The Lutheran understanding of baptism and God's call for dominion over creation makes caring for the environment an important issue. Many of the ELCA's 5.2 million members live, work, and worship along the shores of these amazing natural resources. Lake Superior is the largest of the Great Lakes. In our first story, we journey across the southern shore and talk to Lutherans about their love for the lake and their respect for its power to give life and to take it.
My dad, he learned it from my mother's dad, who fished out of Silver Cliff up here. So that's where he learned to fishing. I learned it from my dad, and us kids were on the lake, all the time. When we were little, we were put in the net box, set up in the front of the boat, because my mother had to row the nets out for him. And I just love being on the lake. I love Lake Superior, and I love being out there and get a few herring nets out there, and just my life. It's God's creation, so it's pretty special. I get up in the morning, go out there just as soon as it's light enough to see, and every morning I see the sun rise, and what more can you ask for, huh? But then sometimes it's dirty, stormy out there too, and people think I'm crazy. Palm Sunday in 1935, and they went on the lake to run some nets. 4 miles off the lake, and 60 degrees that day, so they didn't even take a jacket with them out. And, sudden northwester came up, like it's starting to blow right now, and they were found 10 days later over at Cornucopia, Wisconsin. They tied themselves to the boat, so evidently they knew what would happen, so that they'd find the bodies, and they froze to death because it dropped from 60 degrees to 10 degrees and started snowing in 1 hour. Back in the early 50s is when Reserve Mining started building their plant up there, and they started dumping in October of 55. And by 56, August 27th of 56, that's when the dirty water reached our place and went beyond. And every year it was getting worse and worse, and the herring just disappeared. They had to quit dumping in the lake in '84, and now the herring are starting to show up again. It gets a little better every year. So things are looking up. It's going in the right direction now. And I think now people are more keep in mind the environment and try and keep the air and the water clean. Hopefully we never have nothing like that again.
One important aspect of baptism that has sometimes been misunderstood in the church is that it's a present participle experience. It's living in relationship with Jesus, not simply a 5-minute ceremony plus pictures, or as some people in this area talk about getting your kid done. There's nothing done about it, but it's an ongoing relationship, and part of that discipleship aspect is to live a life in such a way that you bless creation. You bless the people around you. You do those things that are life-giving. And of course that strengthens the witness to Jesus Christ when one can see the church honestly caring about that which is good for all people and for the planet.
Fresh water is really the only appropriate symbol for baptism. Baptism is a sacrament of cleansing and rebirth. And we don't wash in dirty water. We wash in water that cleanses us. And so it really is important for us to think about that on a large scale, that this lake, which is an abundant source of fresh water for the world, that it remain clear.
I think the lake, for a lot of people, is a natural resource. It's a playground. But for others, it is a kind of sacrament. To be on a kayak involves an engagement of your own skill. It's like participating in an elegant dance. I think, finally, one of the meanings of sacrament is to intersect with what I would call the playfulness of God. There's a wonderful music that one plays with one's body and the natural world around themselves when one participates. And that's renewing, that's restoring to the psyche, to the soul. Our bodies are made up of 70% of water, and you can live for 10, even 30 days without food, but you can't live for more than 4 or 5 days without water. And in religious tradition, water has always represented the soul or the unconscious, the spirit. In the Christian tradition, among other religions of the world, water is used as an initiation ritual. There's a sense of cleansing, of drowning, and of immersion, and of emergence as a new person. The lake has incredible regenerative properties. It takes, for instance, Lake Erie 3 years, and all its water completely replaces itself. Lake Michigan, it's about 80 years. Lake Huron, about 70 years. But Lake Superior, it's 200 years. It will regenerate itself, restore itself. And nature is much tougher than I think we thought. There is this primal, redemptive, renewal power that lives in physical phenomena like the lakes that carries this incredible, redemptive, restorative power. And humans can't, in a sense, destroy it.
I'm an Ojibwe, which is from this area. I grew up by this lake. I lived all my life here in Marquette. It's offered drink to quench our thirst. It's offered coolness in hot summer days, somewhere to cool off. There's something about just being by the lake. In my culture, you know, our elders always said that this wasn't our land. This was our grandchildren's and our great-grandchildren's. So I think it's important to remember that they have the cleanliness, that they can drink from this water, and they can come down here and swim and eat the fish that live in this water.
Born and raised in Marquette, Michigan. Sailed on the Great Lakes most of my working days. I was second mate on the Anderson. I thought about it often, and when it comes around the 10th of November, there's always the music about it, and it's brought back to you, and you do think about it then. And it could have been us instead of the Fitzgerald. We were at the west end of the lake. There happens to be a vessel within sight to the west of us. And I asked the captain, I says, "What vessel is that, Cap?" He says, "That's the Edmund Fitzgerald coming out of Superior." Progressively, as we headed east, the weather conditions changed. The seas eventually got to a point of 25-foot seas, 25 to 30. The winds were 85 miles an hour, and we were continually taking heavy seas over our vessel. And of course, we weren't riding comfortably. We were in communications with the Edmund Fitzgerald, and he thought he would be able to make it down into Whitefish Bay. And then we had a heavy snowstorm, and radar is not effective in a snowstorm, so we lost his position. The first mate had notified the captain that we no longer have any contact with the Fitzgerald. And his supposition was that he's possibly gone to the bottom. Toward morning, the seas diminished so we could get out, and we were trying to pick up any debris that we could find, and there was debris picked up, such as lifeboat stays and so forth. I've always been a believer in God, and there's times you seek the Lord for help, and I've been brought up religiously here in Marquette, and there's times I've said prayers, and especially when you see the lake is enraged as it was.
At the water's edge together, son and 5-year-old grandson have come to whittle a while, the excuse they give for being there. "Do you think great-granddad can see me now?" he asked. And his father said, "You bet he can." In ancient ritual they come, each in his generation, to the water's edge, to view far and away the heart's horizon, to travel the distance to the far shore, instinctively drawn where great-granddads, granddads, fathers, and sons come, to know the truths that touch the heart's line.
What poet Julianne Isabella calls the heart's line is really a lifeline for all of us. Without fresh water, human beings cannot survive. Here in North America, we are blessed with the world's richest supply, the Great Lakes. They are a storehouse threatened by pollution. What threatens them? We talked to scientists, environmental groups, and stewardship experts. What they have to say is both disturbing and encouraging. They call her the Blue Heron. Once an Atlantic fishing trawler, the Blue Heron now plies the waters of the Great Lakes. Her mission is to better understand these inland seas by unlocking their secrets. Eric Brown is a professor at the University of Minnesota at Duluth. Brown works with the Large Lakes Observatory and spends a lot of time aboard the Blue Heron.
The Blue Heron is a vessel equipped for undertaking research on Lake Superior, well, throughout the Great Lakes, but most of the work we've been doing is on Lake Superior. And it's equipped for a wide range of studies, ranging from mapping the lake floor and using seismic techniques for looking at the thickness of sediments on the bottom.
To you and me, it's just mud. But to scientists aboard the Blue Heron, sedimentary deposits show the history of the lakes.
The sediments pile up over time, more and more and more every year, slowly. So it's not, just a few tenths of a millimeter a year typically in the lake. And they record things about what was going on at that time. This is the coring device moving down through the water and sitting at the bottom. So it's a historic record, and so as you go down and cut through it, you can find out about what conditions were like in 1950, 1900, and 1800, and 1700, all the way back down to the time that the glaciers were in the lake basin about 10,000 years ago.
Getting a sample of mud up from the lake floor, 500 feet below the surface, isn't easy. Darren Albrecht also works with the Great Lakes Observatory.
This is a multi-core apparatus, and what happens is we deploy this off the back of the vessel and submerge it down to the bottom of the lake. Once it gets down to the bottom of the lake, the whole apparatus sinks into the mud. We pull it up. The feet are up when we put it down, and then as we pull it up, the feet go down into the position they're in now, and they seal the sediments in the tubes. Then once we get it back up here, we can take the tubes off and set them over in a rack.
Like rings on a tree, slices of core are analyzed to determine their composition. The lesson? We humans leave our mark on the lakes.
Before they started using unleaded gasoline in the 70s, there was a lot of lead being pumped into the environment by humans. And once they started using unleaded gasoline, they stopped putting lead in the environment. And the same holds true with lead. When you analyze it in the computer, you have a nice background, and then you see a spike as to where humans started adding this to their environment. Once you get up to the 70s, you see a maximum of the lead in the environment, and then it dies off because they started using the unleaded gasoline. Humans are a direct link to their environment, and they can have profound effects on it.
Tim Holst is professor of geology with the Large Lakes Observatory. He is also a member of First Lutheran Church in Duluth.
The Large Lakes Observatory has a message that we need to understand much more about natural systems, how they work. We're part of these systems and we've influenced them in a great way, but we don't know what they would have done without us, much less how we've influenced them. We know a little bit of it, but we need to know much more about what those systems are like if we didn't exist here at all, and then also what we've done to affect those systems during our short time on this planet.
Hands-on education is what Duluth's new Great Lakes Aquarium is all about. Dedicated solely to the study of fresh water and its ecosystems, the Great Lakes Aquarium is the only facility of its kind in the world. David Lonsdale is the executive director of the Great Lakes Aquarium.
The Great Lakes Aquarium is, I think, the newest aquarium to open in the country, and it deals entirely with the subject of fresh water. It's a brand new facility that has been opened to teach about Lake Superior, using Lake Superior as a lens to examine how Great Lakes work. We have a big problem with air toxins being deposited, and they come from, they're truly international, from South America, from other places in the world, that are being carried on the air currents, and then they're depositing themselves here in places like Lake Superior. We have 20% of the world's fresh water right here in the middle of North America. And that makes it pretty important because the water we have is the only water we've got anywhere around. It's not being made anymore. And if anything, it's probably more precious than gold. And when people get involved in a hands-on type of experience, they do go away with some thoughts about fresh water, the plants and animals that they've seen that are related to fresh water. And when they sit down in front of their TV, for instance, and there's a TV program about anacondas in Brazil and places like that, they start making those interconnections about those freshwater animals and the freshwater here.
Carl Lindquist has been making connections since his family began vacationing along the shores of Lake Superior when he was a boy. Today, Lindquist is director of the Central Lake Superior Watershed Partnership. The partnership's goal is to educate the public and protect local lakes, rivers, and streams that drain into Lake Superior.
I work with people in 10 different watersheds that drain into Lake Superior. My job is focusing on a lot of the problems in these watersheds and how those problems in the watershed impact Lake Superior. Everybody who lives in this watershed really determines the fate of Lake Superior by their day-to-day actions.
One way Lindquist Group is making a difference is by painting warning signs on storm sewer grates in and around the shoreline city of Marquette, Michigan.
This was a community education event where we got volunteers, youth
and adults to do this stenciling up and down the streets to raise awareness about storm drains. A lot of people don't realize that what goes in these drains goes directly into Lake Superior. Oils, paints, herbicides, pesticides. Sometimes people actually dump things in here. You know, in my job, I see a lot of the threats, the impacts facing Lake Superior and the potential harm, as well as the very real damage that's been done. And I feel it's of the utmost importance that we do everything we can to protect and restore Lake Superior.
Freshwater is so important because although the world has so much of water, more than 95% of it is in the salt water, and or 97 some people would say, and the 3% fresh water, most of it is tied up in the ice caps, glaciers and other places.
Every part of the ecological system is connected to every other part. What happens in the Great Lakes affects what happens 2,000 miles from here. Some of the same problems that we have right here are those in other environments, whether they're desert or not. And we need to understand that. We need to understand desert systems, lake systems. We need to understand more and more everything we can about natural systems. That's why people 2,000 miles away should care about what happens in the Great Lakes.
Big business, industry, and corporate farming are often targets of environmental groups. But you and I also contribute to freshwater pollution. It starts in our own backyards. MOSAIC producer Tim Frakes reports.
This might look like Minnesota's boundary waters or maybe a trout stream in New York's Adirondacks. Actually, it's suburban Chicago.
The East Branch of the DuPage River is a small stream that begins and ends in suburban Chicago. Urban tributaries like this are common across the United States. 20 years ago, pollution in the DuPage reached intolerable levels. Untreated sewage and other factors killed most animal life. Today, the river is cleaner, but still not where it should be. Runoff pollution fed by hundreds of thousands of people still threatens water quality.
Since I live along the banks of the DuPage and since my family drinks water drawn from Lake Michigan, I thought it would be a good idea to see how my home and my lifestyle contribute to pollution in this tributary of the mighty Mississippi.
As the DuPage River winds its way past subdivisions, 6-lane highways, and forest preserves, it provides a home to a wide variety of plant and animal life. Don LaBrose is a biologist with the DuPage County Forest Preserve.
What we're doing now, especially on district land and some other private lands, is trying to revert the East Branch back to maybe what it originally looked like. There's no way we're ever going to get to it exactly, but we can still solve flooding, but in a different way. Instead of channelizing everything and shooting the water out of here quickly, we can create these large, massive wetlands like we have here in Hidden Lake. The water quality of the East Branch in the 50s and 60s was pretty much a sewer. It was very poor water quality. There was very little life in the river system. So in 1972, when the Clean Water Act was enacted, it helped to start solving some of these problems. So that today, our water quality in the East Branch is 1,000 times better than it was in the 1950s and 60s.
So how can I make a difference? Let's look at my house, which is only a few blocks from the river.
Fresh water enters my property in two ways, through water pipes buried in the ground and through rainfall. Fresh water leaves my property in two basic ways. The first is through the sewers.
That's mostly good news.
For the DuPage River.
Wastewater that goes down the drain makes its way to a treatment facility before re-entering the DuPage watershed.
The big problem for the DuPage and rivers near your area is the storm drain. Wastewater that doesn't go down the sewer drain goes down the storm drain.
Unlike the sewer, water that enters the storm drain goes directly into the river, untreated.
With that in mind, let's look at some simple ways you can keep rivers and streams in your area clean. One big villain is lawn fertilizer and weed killers.
If you're like me, the people's lawn next door looks great, so the pressure to conform is really on. if you simply must fertilize, use an organic fertilizer. And before you apply it, make sure you read the labels carefully. Right before a rainstorm is not the time to fertilize. All you'll wind up doing is washing fertilizer down the storm drain and into the river.
Fertilizers and pesticides are another area that we have a concern with, because most, at least what I've seen, is most folks use too much. You really don't need to use as much as they say on the instructions, and then most people use more than what the instructions say anyways.
Wise use of your lawnmower can also make a big difference. First of all, make sure the wheels keep the grass at least 3 inches long. Longer grass does a better job of holding stormwater and reduces erosion. And if you don't have one, use a mulching mower. A mower with a mulching blade does a better job of chopping up the clippings. And it fertilizes your lawn every time you mow. If you change your own oil, recycle it. Don't let it run down the storm drain. Just about any gas station will take your used oil for free. While we're at the gas station, here's a tip. Don't top off the tank. That gas that spills onto the concrete winds up right in the river. For those who live in cold weather regions, try using sand this winter instead of salt on your sidewalk. While sand doesn't melt snow the way salt does, it will keep you from slipping and breaking your neck. Remember, melted salt water runs directly into your freshwater stream. That old computer equipment you can't seem to give away becomes a problem when you dump it in the trash. Old computer equipment contains lots of heavy metals. Landfills are jammed with old computers that leak lead and mercury into the watershed. There's a great deal that your congregation can do to protect the rivers too. Tony Tisnick is a member of Faith Lutheran Church in Glen Ellen, Illinois, a congregation in the DuPage Watershed. As a retired landscape architect, Tony has spent a lifetime weaving his faith with care for the environment. We asked Tony to take a group of children from Faith down to the DuPage on Sunday morning and talk about the river and our responsibility as Christians.
We do have a big part to play. Each one of us is responsible in his own little area. If we look back to the Bible, we were created in God's image, and we were given husbandry or the dominion over all things. And it was left to our charge to look after these things. And if we don't do this, I think we're missing some of the calling that we have as Christians.
The fact is that rivers and streams here in Illinois, and in places where you live, are probably better off today than they were 20 or 30 years ago. But if we want to keep them that way, and even improve them, we're going to have to make some sacrifices. But hey, it's worth it.
If you'd like to know more about our program, receive a transcript, or search a particular topic, log on to our website at www.elca.org. Thanks for watching. This is MOSAIC, and you are a part of it.